Hey guys, welcome to another episode. We are finally starting the disassembly process on our new project. This is a 1982 124 Spider that we recently picked up. I'm going to make sure I drop it up on the top here, the first episode where we go and get it. And the first thing we're going to start working on is our suspension. So the first thing we're going to drop out is the whole rear end of the car. Now I got really eager and excited, which, I mean, you can't blame me because I know you do the same thing. But I already got it pulled out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to backtrack to show you guys how easy this is. And I did it within a matter of an hour. So I'm going to get out the tools that you're going to need to do this job and how to get it out real quick, real simple. And it's so much easier to work on a rear end when it's already out of the car and you're not working, you know, upside down. So I'm going to get you guys set up, show you what you need and how to drop this out, and it's really how easy it is. So let's get to it. There's some very basic tools that you're going to need to do this job. One of them is going to be a breaker bar. This isn't anything super fancy. I've got a 19mm socket on the end of that. You'll need a 19mm open end or boxed in wrench, a 17mm, a 13mm, a 10, and you'll also need a 10mm line wrench, so when we get to the point of our brake lines, we won't round them off. You'll also need a little assortment of sockets with a ratchet on there, all different sizes. This kit goes all the way up to a 19mm, and of course I've already got one missing, but it's around here somewhere. So these are going to be your basic tools for this. You might need to have a couple of them, like 219s or 217s, make your job a little easier, or if you just have the socket with the wrench, should be able to knock it out pretty easy. I'm going to get you guys a quick tip here while we're at it, is I like to put my parts in a bag with a label. So this one is drive shaft to rear axle bolts. So these are all the nuts and bolts it takes to attach the drive shaft to the actual pinion on the back. And those are all nice and clean. And here I've got the shock bolts with the plastic nuts are on there. So these are also the pan rod and under axle bolts, trailing arm bolts, 19mm. So I always like to label them as good as I can, and also I like to make sure they're clean. So these have been super dirty nuts and bolts underneath the car its whole life, probably never come off, and so I like to wire wheel them, clean them up, and that way when it comes to reassembly, they go on super easy. As I'm sitting here fighting the nut, they go on super easy and don't have to fight them. And when you're super excited to the point where you can start reassembly, you don't have to wait to clean all the hardware. They're already all clean in a bag, labeled to go. And sometimes I'll put the size on there just to make sure I know exactly what wrench I need to have in my hand. There's nothing worse than guessing the wrong one. And finally, this is for your handbrake cable, and you see I put on here a 10mm nut, and that's what these are. These are all cleaned up, relatively clean. They've got all the grime and road grease and dirt off of them. All I use is a simple pen, a note card, and some super cheap store sandwich bags. You can also get the snack size, you can get the quart size, gallon size, depending what you're working on. But this always tends to do the job for me, and I never lose the hardware. And as you notice, I like to keep the nut, the lock washer, and the bolt all together. That way I know exactly which nut came off exactly which bolt. And it takes just that little bit of extra time to clean them and label them. But when you come to reassembly, think about how much time you save on having these already done, clean, ready to go in. And this is also a good time to inspect your hardware, right? You don't want to have broken hardware, threads chewed up. If there's cracks in it, this would be a really good time to see it. So if you do have to put in that order for extra hardware, you'll know well in advance that you'll need that hardware. So that's a cool tip I like to pass on to people, and it makes your job so much easier. So let's jump onto this rear end and get it taken out. So I've already got the rear end out of the car, but I really think this is going to be a better way for you guys to learn and see where the pieces are from above, rather than trying to show you from underneath, really bad angles, not really light, really hard to see. So I think the best thing to do is to have it here on the the sawhorses. That way you guys can get a better feel of where things are and how it comes apart. So the first thing, get this out of the way, the first thing you're going to want to do is take off the drive shaft. So you guys are facing the, this is the front of the car, and where I'm standing is the rear of the car. Okay, so we're just going to pretend that. The drive shaft is attached here. There's 4 13mm nut and bolt combinations that hold on the drive shaft here to the pinion. And once you get those off, it's a flat mating surface, so a swift hit of a rubber mallet or even the palm of your hand should be able to get that off. If you have the transmission in your car, you may have to push the drive shaft forward into the transmission a little bit. That way you get that clearance to drop it down. Luckily mine, the transmission's already out, so I didn't have to worry about that. The next thing we're going to take off is these trailing arm bolts. They're 19mm. It's a nut and bolt combination. There's one on each side. They might fight you a little bit. Make sure you use plenty of lubricant to really break these off. It was at this moment I realized that I forgot to mention the bottom trailing arms. There's a short and a long. They both require the 19mm bolt and nut combination, but there's one underneath the panhard arm, which you can see here on both sides, so don't forget those either. The next thing you're going to want to take off is this panhard here. You're going to take this off. I think it's also a 19mm if I remember correctly. This is also a 19mm. I just left it on here. This one is actually relatively new. It looks like it's been replaced recently. So we're going to keep that on as long as we can. The rubbers are all good on it. After that, you're going to want to remove your shocks. Now your shocks with your springs look like this. They are housed together and they sit at the end. Just like that. Spring is on top and the shocks sit sideways. And that's compressed in the car underneath. So the whole time you're doing this, as you start to loosen these pieces, you need to make sure you have a jack stand or a jack underneath it. That way it doesn't just drop on you. That's the #1 way to ruin it. So you need to make sure you have a jack underneath it. So when you go underneath here, in the engine, not the engine, in the trunk of the car, there's going to be a 13mm nut and a lock nut, which will be like that, and they come right off. And these are KYBs. These are like stock style shocks. These are the ones that are not going to go back in the car. These are perfectly good shocks. They work, but they're not what I want. What I actually want, I've got right here, already ordered. And these bad boys, these are, you ready for this? These are amazing. Now these are exclusive. I'll put a link in the description for these. These are exclusively from Vic Autosports. These sports suspension shocks, they're 15% stiffer than the normal standard stock suspension. But if you look, they're actually designed off the same platform. So these are actually designed to fit just like stock, but they're a little more stiff and they give you that sporty, hug the road kind of feel, and you get the response you want. And the even crazier part is these are practically the same price as stock. So I'll make sure to put a link in the description for these. You can get a whole set of 4 for under 150 bucks. That's a steal for sport suspension, brand new, awesome pieces. Highly recommend these. These are going to feel great on the road. So after you take off your shock, on the bottom is going to be another nut and bolt, which goes through the side here. Now this is on both sides, so make sure you do it on both. And when you release those, it should bring the car down, or the rear end down. So what I did is I kind of left this in here until it came down, so I had some more room to work, and it made the job a lot easier with all this room I have. The last thing you'll want to have to undo is your handbrake cable. Now your handbrake cable has 2 13mm lock nuts on there, one lock nut, one regular nut, so you can adjust it. So you want to make sure you get those off, otherwise you're going to be fighting your handbrake the whole time. And this one has definitely seen better days. It's got melted spots and cracked and super stiff and rubber's falling off. I mean, this is going to get replaced, so don't worry about that. The only other thing that's going to hold you up is going to be the rubber line from the body down the center to meet your hard lines here in the middle. Mine was completely cracked, corroded, and it really needed to be replaced, so I just cut it. It's only a few dollars, and all the hassle of fighting it upside down just isn't worth it. So I cut it and now it was able to come free and drop completely. And now that it was on the bench, that's when I was able to break out my line wrench and start breaking free these hard brake lines. Now these are tricky because you need this line wrench, because if you don't, you're going to round off these fittings and you're going to have to replace the whole line because they've got a flare on the end, and you're going to have a really hard time getting those off, vice grips, and it gets really messy. So make sure you use plenty of penetrating fluid in these. Let them sit overnight if you want. You can even use a little bit of heat, don't use too much, but you can use that too, and it should come off nice and easy. I was very fortunate because all of mine did. They all broke free from the original rubber lines, and I'll bring you guys closer to this one because this is exactly what the one underneath looked like. But this is really simple to bring out, and it is so much easier to work on when it's all here on a sawhorse. So let me get you guys closer on certain pieces of this, that way we have a good understanding of how this comes out and how we're going to work on it. So you can see on this rubber brake line here, this rubber hose, to see how chewed up and gross that is. I mean, that is just a goner. Who knows how long that's been there. And the same thing with my rotors. I mean, look at these, all scaly and gross, missing, but at least it turns, so that's good. And same thing on this side, we've got a lot of cracking, and see it's starting to split here. Not very good at all. You can see that big old split. But yeah, we were very fortunate. All of our hard lines broke off. These here all came out very easily. Also here I had a little trouble with that one, but it finally let go. And these are factory retaining clips, so that's nice that they're still on there, which means that no one's messed with it. See them there, there, and there. At least we hope nobody's messed with it, but you can see how long that this has been up under the car. I guarantee that this has never been touched. And here you can see that pinion seal that's just been leaking and leaking and leaking, and it's just so black. I mean, look at my hands already, just from barely touching the thing. So you see just how dirty this is. So the next thing we're gonna do is take off this back cover to take a good look at our rear differential here. So I'm just taking a 13 millimeter onto these bolts here. Let's get them out, we'll get them cleaned up, and we'll take a look. So noise alert, just be ready. So the next thing we're going to want to do is find the lip here where it comes together, but you can see by all the stuff falling off, it's going to be a little tricky to find. So what I'm going to do is take my flathead, and hopefully I don't drop it. Yeah, came off pretty easy. All right, not too bad. Let's see what we got here. All right, so that's the back side of our cover. See a little bit of buildup. You can definitely smell it's old fluid, old. I guarantee this has probably never been changed in the lifetime of the car. So we're looking at 40, almost 40 years of fluid here. But let's take a look inside. So the first thing we're going to want to look for is sediment on the bottom. Now some of this here is the dirt that fell in from opening the case. But you can also look at the casing. The gasket that's on it, you can see it had a nice good seal. Yeah, it looks good all the way around. But you see on the bottom here how gross that is. Yeah, it's not supposed to look like that. So we're gonna turn the front end here and take a look at all the teeth. Make sure we don't have any cracks or anything like that. But you can see it's turning really free, which is a good sign. Don't see any damaged teeth yet. See some marks on here. I'll have to do some research on them, but 1544. That's what it says right there. That looks like I missed some. What does it say? Oh, did it with the wrong finger. Let me grab a rag. Let's find a rag. Here we go. Well, you can see the Fiat logo right there. See if I can get in on it. 10/39-131. So I'm sure this is something to do with the gear ratio in here. But if you know, drop it in the comments below. Let me know what that is, because I'm not sure. I haven't done my reading yet. Well, let's keep going. Nice smooth. Don't see any issues. And it seems like we're all the way around now. So it looks good, teeth look good, not a lot of marks on it, and the seal looks good. It just never got changed in its life. I mean, that's pretty bad. So at least we have it open now. We've got the cover off. We can clean the cover, get a nice new gasket on there, fix our pinion scale in the front, and we'll have a nice fresh rear end. Of course, we'll be getting all this grime and dirt on it. Good power wash will do this thing some justice. After we close this up, of course, we're gonna get that all cleaned out with a rag. Get this all cleaned up, power washed, and done. And we're gonna do a quick blow through our hard lines to make sure there's nothing blocking those. So let's grab our air gun and shoot some air down there. So all I'm doing is taking some compressed air, just like that. I'm gonna blow it through the hard line to make sure that there isn't any garbage in the line, really. That way when we go to replace it and clean this up, we don't have anything blocking our way. I'm going to put a rag at the end so it doesn't spray everywhere. Oh, well, you can see there's a little crud in there, a little black. But it's a good thing we put a rag on the end, because that would have gone everywhere. Alright, that's one down. Time to do the other one. Put that right there, catch all that. It's pretty gross. Oh, looks like we didn't put that quite right, did we? Alright, those are nice and clear. Next thing, I think what we're going to do is put the cover back on. We're going to clean those bolts up, have those bolts cleaned up, and we can put it back on and get it nice, cleaned, and scrubbed so it's not so gross. So let's get this thing clean. You can see just from the easy cleaning of the tops of the bolts, cleaning off this cover, just how much life comes back into these parts from a simple cleaning. Now obviously this is not where we're going to leave it. We're going to have to take this back off and put a new gasket on it anyway. But you can just see the difference that's going to bring back to life this rear end. This whole axle assembly here is going to come back around so nice. Even though no one's going to see it, we know that it's going to look great underneath this car. So I think the next thing we're going to do is take it outside and we are going to wash this thing off. I don't know how much we're going to get out of it. I'm really kind of afraid of getting some water in here. I didn't tighten these very much. I only got them in there till they're nice and snug. I didn't torque them down or anything like that. Maybe we'll wait on the cleaning until I have all the parts to do the full reassembly. Why don't we do that? You know what? We're going to make a part 2 to this series on reassembling after you take it out of the car and clean up some of the parts. So in part 2, we're going to get all new gaskets, our shocks, springs, all of this put back in here. We could even do our brake pads, our calipers, install new rotors. That way this whole end is already ready to go, and all we have to do is drop it in the car. Well, lift it into the car, but you know what I mean. We'll get this back in the car. It'll be all ready to go. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this episode. Make sure you stay tuned for part 2, where we reassemble the entire rear end with all new brake calipers, all new rotors. We're going to put all new seals, close up this rear end, new pinion seal, rear gasket, get all these brake lines nice and clean, get this thing all shiny again. That way it'll last another 40 years to come so that we can enjoy it for the long run. So until next time guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment, and I'll answer your questions if I can. Just make sure you drop them down below. Make sure you guys are following me on Instagram and on Facebook at Garage Time TV. The links are in the description. And until then guys, we'll see ya.